The stranger stumbled into her camp at dawn with blood-streaked tears frozen to his cheeks and hands, outstretched like a man drowning in an invisible sea. Beatrice Palmer had been tracking elk through the Sangre de Cristo Mountains for 3 days when she heard the horse before she saw its rider. The animal came slowly, carefully picking its way through the snow-laden pines with the kind of deliberate caution that spoke of intelligence or desperation. When the horse emerged into the small clearing where she had made her camp, Beatrice saw immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. The man slumped in the saddle wore a heavy wool coat crusted with ice, and his face was turned upward toward the pale winter sky as if seeking warmth from the weak February sun. His eyes were swollen nearly shut, the lids an angry red that even from 20 feet away made Beatrice wince in sympathy. The skin around his eyes had taken on a strange, sunburned quality that seemed entirely wrong for a man traveling in winter. "Easy now," she called out, keeping her voice level and calm as she approached. "Your horse brought you somewhere safe." The man's head turned toward her voice, but his eyes did not track her movement. "Who's there?" His voice cracked with dehydration and pain. "I cannot see. God help me, I cannot see anything." Beatrice reached his horse and placed a steady hand on the animal's neck. The gelding was a sturdy bay, well-bred and well cared for, with good saddle leather that spoke of a man who had means. "My name is Beatrice Palmer. You are in the mountains east of Fort Stanton, New Mexico. What is your name?" "Aaron," the man managed. "Aaron Ashford." "I was caught in the high passes. The snow, the sun on the snow." His hands gripped the saddle horn with white-knuckled desperation. "Everything is white fire. I thought I would die up there." She had heard of snow blindness, though she had never seen a case this severe. Her father had warned her about it during their hunting trips through these same mountains before his death, 2 years ago. The intense sunlight reflecting off snow could burn a man's eyes as surely as staring at the sun itself, leaving him temporarily or even permanently blind. "I am going to help you down," Beatrice said firmly. "Trust me." Aaron Ashford nodded, and Beatrice saw the tremor that ran through him. He was at the end of his strength. She reached up and guided his leg over the saddle, supporting his weight as he half climbed, half fell into her arms. He was tall, she realized, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean build of a man who spent his days in hard work. Despite his obvious distress, he smelled of pine and leather and something else, something distinctly masculine that made her pulse quicken unexpectedly. She pushed the thought away. This was not the time for such foolishness. "Can you walk if I guide you?" she asked. "I will try." His voice held a determination she respected. Beatrice led him slowly to her camp, one arm around his waist, feeling the tremors that racked his body. She had built her fire in a small depression surrounded by rocks, sheltered from the worst of the mountain wind. Her bedroll was spread on a layer of pine boughs, and her supplies were organized with the neat efficiency of someone who had spent many seasons living rough. She eased Aaron down onto a fallen log near the fire and quickly went to tend his horse. The bay gelding stood patiently as she removed the saddle and bridle, checking the animal for injuries. Finding none, she hobbled the horse near her own mare and gave both animals some of the grain she had packed. When she returned to the fire, Aaron sat with his head in his hands, his whole body radiating misery. Beatrice knelt beside him and gently touched his shoulder. "Let me see your eyes." He raised his head, and in the better light she could see the full extent of the damage. His eyes were bloodshot and weeping, the lids so swollen she wondered how he had managed to stay on his horse at all. The surrounding skin was red and inflamed, and when she carefully tried to open one eye wider, he flinched back with a sharp intake of breath. "The pain is considerable," she observed. "Like hot pokers," Aaron confirmed. Every moment is agony. Beatrice stood and went to her packs. She had learned wilderness medicine from her father, and her mother before she died had taught her the healing arts passed down through generations of women who had carved lives from this harsh land. She found what she needed and returned to Aaron's side. "I have willow bark tea that will help with the pain and inflammation," she said. "And I will make a poultice for your eyes. You must rest them in darkness. You understand? Complete darkness for at least 2 days, possibly longer." 2 days. Aaron's voice held desperation. "I must reach Fort Stanton. I have business there, important business that cannot wait." "Your business will have to wait," Beatrice said firmly. "If you do not rest your eyes, you risk permanent damage. You could lose your sight forever. Is your business more important than that?" The fight went out of him visibly. "No, of course not." She set water to boil and prepared the willow bark tea, adding a touch of honey from her dwindling supply. While it steeped, she made a poultice from herbs she had gathered the previous day, adding snow to cool the mixture. When she had everything ready, she knelt beside Aaron again. "Drink this slowly," she instructed, pressing the warm cup into his hands. "All of it." While he drank, she carefully applied the cool poultice to his eyes, working with gentle efficiency. Aaron tensed at first, then gradually relaxed as the cooling herbs began to work. She bound the poultice in place with strips of clean cloth, wrapping them around his head until his eyes were completely covered. "Better?" she asked softly. "Yes," he breathed. "Much better, thank you, Miss Palmer." "Just Beatrice," she corrected. "We are well past formalities, I think." Despite his pain, Aaron's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Then you must call me Aaron." She prepared more tea and a meal of venison jerky softened in broth, feeding him with the same patient care she would have given an injured animal. He ate slowly, and she could see exhaustion beginning to overtake him as the willow bark worked its magic. "You must rest now," she said. "I will keep watch." "But you need rest too," Aaron protested weakly. "I cannot impose." "You are not imposing. Rest." She helped him to her bedroll, spreading her spare blanket over him. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Beatrice sat by the fire and watched him, this stranger who had stumbled into her solitary life like a ghost from another world. She had been alone for so long now. After her father's death, there had been nothing to hold her in Fort Stanton. The house he had built had been sold to pay his debts, and the few relatives she had left wanted nothing to do with a young woman who preferred hunting in the mountains to making a suitable marriage. At 22, Beatrice had chosen freedom over convention, supporting herself through hunting and trapping, trading her furs and game in Fort Stanton several times a year, but otherwise keeping to herself. It was a lonely life, but it was hers. She had grown comfortable with solitude, with the company of her horse and the vast silence of the mountains. Yet looking at Aaron Ashford sleeping by her fire, she felt something stir within her that she had thought long dormant. A longing, perhaps, for connection. For someone to share the beauty and harshness of this wild place. She shook her head at her own foolishness. The man was injured and dependent on her care. Once his eyes healed, he would return to his important business and his regular life, and she would go back to her mountains. That was how it had to be. But even as she told herself this, Beatrice could not quite believe it. The first day passed slowly. Aaron slept most of the time, waking only to drink water and eat the food she prepared. Beatrice kept the fire burning and tended to both horses, gathering more firewood and checking her snares. She caught 2 rabbits and cleaned them efficiently, setting them to roast for the evening meal. When Aaron woke that evening, he seemed more alert despite the bandages still covering his eyes. "How long have I been asleep?" he asked. "Most of the day. It is nearly sunset now." "And you have been watching over me all this time?" Someone had to, Beatrice said practically. Besides, I have chores to keep me occupied. Aaron shifted on the bedroll, wincing. I am not accustomed to being helpless. It is a humbling experience. Most experiences in these mountains are humbling if you approach them correctly. She brought him water and he drank gratefully. Tell me what happened. How did you come to be snow-blind in the high passes? Aaron was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he were deciding how much to tell her. Finally, he spoke. I am a surveyor. I work for the railroad company, mapping routes through the mountains for a proposed line between Santa Fe and the Eastern Territories. I was following a promising pass through the high country when a storm blew in. It lasted 3 days. The storm that ended yesterday morning, Beatrice said. I took shelter from it as well. When it finally cleared, I thought the worst was over. I did not realize the danger. Aaron's hands clenched on the blanket. The sun was so bright on the fresh snow, blinding. But I pressed on because I needed to map the full extent of the pass. By the time I realized something was wrong, the damage was already done. I barely managed to turn my horse's head downslope before the pain became unbearable. Your horse is a smart animal. He brought you down to tree line out of the worst of the reflection. I bought him in Denver 3 months ago. Best decision I ever made. Aaron paused. Though meeting you may rival it. Beatrice felt warmth rise to her cheeks and was grateful he could not see her blush. You are delirious from the pain, she said briskly. Perhaps. Or perhaps I am simply grateful to have stumbled into the camp of the one person in these mountains with the knowledge and kindness to help me. She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, busying herself with the roasting rabbits. But his words stayed with her, warming something deep in her chest that had been cold for too long. That night, as the temperature dropped and the stars emerged brilliant and sharp in the black sky, Beatrice found herself talking to Aaron in a way she had not talked to anyone in years. She told him about her father, about learning to track and hunt through these mountains, about the freedom she had found in this harsh, beautiful place. He listened with an attention that made her feel truly heard, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. In turn, Aaron told her about his life. He had grown up in Boston, the son of a shipbuilder who had expected him to follow in the family business. But Aaron had always been drawn to maps and mathematics, to the challenge of measuring and understanding the vast American landscape. He had studied surveying and engineering in Philadelphia, then headed west as soon as he completed his education. For the past 5 years, he had worked on various railroad and territorial surveys, moving from project to project, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. It is a lonely life, he admitted quietly. Always moving, never belonging anywhere. I tell myself I prefer it that way, that I am married to my work. But sometimes I wonder if I am simply running from something I am afraid to find. What would that be? Beatrice asked. Home, connection. Someone to build a life with rather than just measuring the landscape and moving on. The vulnerability in his voice touched something in Beatrice. I understand that, she said softly. I have been telling myself I prefer solitude, that I do not need anyone. But perhaps I am running too in my own way. From what? From the risk of loss. My mother died when I was 14. My father 2 years ago. Everyone I have loved has left me one way or another. It is easier to be alone than to open myself to that pain again. Aaron reached out a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Beatrice took it. His fingers were warm and strong, and the simple contact sent electricity through her body. They sat like that for a long time, holding hands in the firelight, connected by something neither of them fully understood but both were beginning to recognize. The second day began with snow. Not a storm, but a gentle, persistent fall that blanketed the mountain in fresh white. Beatrice woke to find the world transformed, every branch and rock softened with snow. Aaron still slept, and she took the opportunity to check his eyes. When she carefully unwrapped the bandages, she was relieved to see the swelling had reduced considerably. The angry redness remained, but his eyes no longer wept constantly. When she applied fresh poultice, Aaron stirred. "How do they look?" he asked. "Better. The swelling is going down. May I try to open them?" "Not yet. Another day of darkness at least." "I know it is difficult, but patience now may save your sight." Aaron sighed but nodded. "You are right, of course. I just hate being helpless." "You are not helpless. You are healing. There is a difference." She rewrapped his eyes and helped him sit up. They ate breakfast together, and Beatrice found herself enjoying the simple domesticity of sharing a meal with someone. She had forgotten what it was like to care for another person, to have someone depend on her care and trust. As the day progressed and the snow continued to fall, they talked more. Aaron asked her about Fort Stanton, and she described the small settlement that served as a military outpost and trading center for the surrounding territory. She told him about the merchants she traded with, the soldiers who sometimes caused trouble in town, the families trying to make lives on the harsh frontier. "You have friends there?" Aaron asked. "A few acquaintances. The owner of the trading post, Mrs. Chen, is kind to me. But mostly I keep to myself. People in town think I am strange, a woman living alone in the mountains. They whisper about me." "Let them whisper," Aaron said fiercely. "You are remarkable, Beatrice. You live life on your own terms, beholden to no one. That takes more courage than most people possess." His words warmed her more than the fire. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I mean it. In Boston, women are trapped in parlors and drawing rooms, their lives circumscribed by 1,000 unspoken rules. You have broken free of all that." "It is extraordinary." Beatrice laughed softly. "I think my life would horrify most Boston women. No fine dresses, no tea parties, no suitable suitors." "Their loss," Aaron said simply. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. Despite the bandages covering his eyes, despite having known each other for barely 2 days, something profound was building between them. Beatrice could feel it like a physical presence, a connection that seemed to transcend their circumstances. That afternoon, while Aaron rested, Beatrice went to check her snares and gather more firewood. The snow had stopped, leaving the forest in pristine stillness. As she worked, her mind kept returning to Aaron, to the sound of his voice and the strength of his hand in hers. She had never expected to feel this way about anyone, had convinced herself she was content with solitude. But Aaron Ashford was changing everything, his presence in her life opening doors she had thought permanently closed. When she returned to camp, she found Aaron sitting up, his face turned toward the sound of her approach. "Beatrice, I am here." She set down her bundle of wood and went to his side. "I have been thinking," he said carefully, "about what happens when my eyes heal." Her heart stuttered. "What about it?" "I do not want to simply ride away and never see you again. These 2 days with you have meant more to me than I can easily express." "Aaron, please, let me finish." He reached out and found her hand, gripping it tightly. "I know this is sudden. I know we barely know each other. But I also know that I have never felt this way about anyone. You are strong and capable and kind, and when you speak, I hear the kind of honesty that most people hide behind polite lies. I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. "I feel the same way," she whispered, "but I do not know how this could work. Your life is moving from place to place. Mine is these mountains. We live in different worlds." "Then maybe it is time we both stopped running," Aaron said. "Maybe it is time we found something worth staying for." She thought about that, about what it would mean to let someone into her carefully constructed solitude. It terrified her. But the alternative, letting Aaron ride out of her life forever, terrified her more. "Let us get you healed first," she said finally. "Then we can talk about the future." "That is not a no," Aaron said with a small smile. "No," Beatrice agreed. "It is not a no." The third day dawned clear and cold. Beatrice woke early and checked Aaron's eyes again. The improvement was remarkable. The swelling was nearly gone and the redness had faded to a light pink. When she suggested he might try opening his eyes for brief periods, he seized on the idea eagerly. "Slowly," she cautioned. "Start in darkness first, then gradually expose them to dim light. If there is pain, stop immediately." She unwrapped the bandages carefully, keeping her hand ready to shield his eyes if needed. Aaron's eyes remained closed for a moment, then slowly, cautiously, he opened them. Even in the dim light of early morning, he winced and quickly closed them again. "It hurts, but not unbearably. I can see shapes, light and shadow." "That is excellent," Beatrice said, relief flooding through her. "A few more days and you should be fully healed." "A few more days with you," Aaron murmured. "I find I do not mind the delay at all." She smiled despite herself. "You are incorrigible." Over the next hour, Aaron gradually acclimated to having his eyes open. His vision was still blurry and sensitive to light, but the fact that he could see at all was cause for celebration. Beatrice wrapped a light cloth around his eyes as a shade, allowing him to keep them open while protecting them from the worst of the bright mountain sun. "I want to see you clearly," Aaron said. "It is torture knowing you are right here and not being able to focus on your face." "Soon enough," Beatrice promised. "Patience." But she understood the feeling. There was something intimate about having cared for Aaron while he was blind, about being the voice and hands that guided him through his helplessness. Now, as his sight returned, their relationship was shifting again, becoming something different. Something that would require them both to be equally vulnerable. That afternoon, with Aaron's vision improved enough that he could move around camp with only occasional guidance, they took a short walk through the forest. Beatrice led his horse while Aaron walked beside her, one hand on her arm for balance. The day was beautiful, the sun bright on the snow, and Beatrice found herself acutely aware of every point of contact between them. "Tell me what you see," Aaron said. "I can make out shapes and colors, but not details. Describe it for me." So Beatrice painted the world with words, describing the way the light filtered through the pine boughs, the tracks of deer and rabbits in the fresh snow, the distant peaks rising sharp and white against the impossibly blue sky. Aaron listened with the attention of a man memorizing every detail, and when she finished, he squeezed her arm gently. "You see the world with an artist's eye," he said. "Have you ever thought of writing? Your descriptions are vivid enough that I can almost see clearly through your words." "I never thought I had anything worth writing about." "Then you are wrong. The way you experience this place, the way you understand it, that is worth recording, worth sharing." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, and Beatrice found herself thinking about his words. She had always assumed her life was too simple, too isolated to be of interest to anyone. But Aaron seemed to see value in her experiences, in the knowledge she had accumulated through years of solitary living. When they returned to camp, Aaron was exhausted from even that small exertion. Beatrice settled him by the fire and prepared their evening meal. As she worked, she found herself humming, a melody her mother used to sing. She had not hummed or sung in years, had forgotten that simple expression of contentment. "You have a lovely voice," Aaron said, startling her. "I did not realize I was making noise. It was a beautiful noise. Please do not stop on my account." So she continued humming as she cooked, and later, as they ate together, Aaron asked her about her mother. Beatrice found herself telling stories she had not thought of in years, about her mother's herb garden and her skill with healing, about the songs she sang and the stories she told. The memories made her ache with loss, but also warmed her with remembered love. "She would have liked you," Beatrice said softly. "She always said the measure of a man was not in his words but in his actions. You have shown more courage and grace in your helplessness than most men show in their strength." Aaron reached for her hand. "And your father? What would he have thought?" "He would have tested you," Beatrice said with a small laugh. "Taken you hunting, seen if you could track and shoot and survive in the wild, but I think he would have approved. He respected competence and intelligence, and you have both in abundance." "I wish I could have met them." "So do I." That night they sat close by the fire, Beatrice's head resting on Aaron's shoulder, his arm around her waist. The intimacy felt natural, inevitable, as if they had been moving toward this moment since the instant his horse stumbled into her camp. When Aaron turned his face toward hers, Beatrice met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was tender and searching and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I am falling in love with you," Aaron said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it is too soon, too fast, but I cannot deny what I feel." "Then do not," Beatrice whispered. "I am falling in love with you too." They kissed again, deeper this time, and Beatrice felt the last of her careful walls crumbling. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges they would face, she knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to face them with Aaron by her side. The fourth day brought a decision point. Aaron's vision had improved dramatically. While still sensitive to bright light and occasionally blurry, he could now see well enough to ride. The question was, what happened next? They discussed it over breakfast, both knowing the conversation could not be avoided any longer. Aaron's surveying work required him to report to Fort Stanton, where his supervisor was expecting detailed maps and notes from his expedition into the high passes. Beatrice's life was in these mountains, at least for now. "Come with me to Fort Stanton," Aaron said. "You said you trade there several times a year anyway. Come now and let me properly court you. Let us see if what we have built here can survive in the real world." "And what happens when your work takes you away again?" Beatrice asked, voicing her deepest fear. "You said yourself you never stay in one place long. I will not be the woman left behind, waiting and wondering when or if you will return." Aaron was quiet for a long moment, his expression serious. "You are right. The way I have been living is not compatible with the kind of life I want to build with you, so I will have to change. You would give up your work. For me, not give it up entirely, but perhaps redirect it. There is plenty of surveying work to be had in New Mexico territory. Ranchers need their land mapped. The military needs updated maps of this region. Mining companies need geological surveys. I could base myself in Fort Stanton or somewhere nearby and take on local work. I would still travel, but not for months at a time. I could have a home to return to, a life. With you." The offer was more than Beatrice had dared hope for, but she needed to be certain. "Are you sure? Your work for the railroad, the grand surveys, that is what you trained for, what you love." "I love the work," Aaron agreed, "but I love the idea of a life with you more. And I think I have been using the work as an excuse, a way to avoid putting down roots, because I was afraid of being trapped the way my father was, locked into one place and one life with no escape. But these past days with you have shown me that commitment does not have to mean imprisonment. It can mean freedom of a different kind, the freedom to be fully yourself with someone who accepts you completely." Beatrice felt tears slide down her cheeks. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and strong and kind. I know you make me laugh and make me think." I know that every moment with you feels more real than anything I have experienced in years of wandering. If you need more time to be sure of your feelings, I will wait, but I am already certain of mine." She thought about it, really thought about it, examining her heart with the same careful attention she gave to tracking game through the forest. What she found there was clear and undeniable. Love, yes, but also trust and hope, and a deep certainty that Aaron Ashford was the man she wanted to build a life with. "I am certain, too," she said finally. "Let us go to Fort Stanton together. Let us see what kind of life we can build." The joy on Aaron's face made her heart soar. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, and Beatrice surrendered to the moment, to the rightness of being held by him. But there was still the practical matter of getting to Fort Stanton. Aaron's eyes, while much improved, were not yet strong enough for him to safely navigate on his own. The route from their current location to Fort Stanton would take them through a mountain pass, a journey of at least 2 days even in good weather. "We will need to go carefully," Beatrice said, already planning the route in her mind. "The pass I am thinking of is not as high as the one that damaged your eyes, but there is still considerable snow. We should travel mostly in the early morning and evening when the sun is lower, and you must wear a bandage as a shade during the brightest hours." "You will lead the way?" Aaron asked. "I will lead your horse through the pass," Beatrice confirmed. "I know these mountains. I will get us through safely." They spent the rest of the day breaking camp and preparing for the journey. Beatrice made certain both horses were well rested and properly shod. She organized their supplies efficiently, packing everything they would need for the 2-day journey plus extra in case of delays. Aaron helped as much as he could, though Beatrice insisted he conserve his strength for the ride ahead. That night, their last in the forest camp, they made love for the first time. It was tender and awkward and perfect, a physical expression of the emotional bond that had formed between them. Afterward, lying wrapped in blankets under the stars, Beatrice felt a contentment she had never known. This was what she had been missing, what she had been afraid to want. Not just physical intimacy, but the deep connection that came from truly knowing and being known by another person. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Aaron replied, pulling her closer. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving it." They set out at dawn the next morning, just as the first light was touching the highest peaks. Beatrice led Aaron's bay gelding while riding her own mare, moving at a steady pace that covered ground without exhausting the animals. Aaron sat the saddle easily despite his compromised vision, trusting Beatrice completely to guide them safely. The morning was cold but clear, perfect weather for traveling. They followed a game trail that Beatrice knew well, winding through pine forests and across meadows buried in snow. By mid-morning they had reached the base of the pass. "This is the difficult part," Beatrice warned. "The trail is narrow and icy in places. Trust your horse and trust me. We will get through." Aaron nodded, wrapping the cloth around his eyes as Beatrice had instructed. With his vision limited and the sun growing stronger, he would need to rely entirely on her guidance. Beatrice started up the trail, leading Aaron's horse with a firm hand on the reins. The path switchbacked up the mountainside, each turn taking them higher into the thin air. Snow lay deep on either side of the trail, and in places, ice made the footing treacherous. Beatrice picked their route carefully, testing each step before committing the horses to it. Behind her, she could hear Aaron talking softly to his horse, keeping the animal calm with the steady sound of his voice. The bay responded well, following Beatrice's mare with trust and intelligence. As the hours passed and the sun climbed higher, the temperature rose slightly, causing some of the ice to melt and refreeze in treacherous sheets. At the highest point of the pass, Beatrice called a halt. They were above the tree line here, exposed to the full force of the mountain wind. But the view was spectacular, a vista of snow-covered peaks stretching in every direction. She helped Aaron dismount and guided him to a sheltered spot among the rocks. "We are at the top," she told him. "It is all downhill from here." "How much longer?" Aaron asked. "We should reach the valley floor by nightfall if we keep good pace. Then another half day to Fort Stanton tomorrow." She gave him water and dried meat, and they rested for 20 minutes while the horses caught their breath. Then it was back into the saddle and down the western slope of the pass. The descent was in some ways more challenging than the climb, as the horses had to work harder to maintain their balance on the steep, slippery trail. But Beatrice's experience showed, and she guided them down safely, choosing her route with the expertise of someone who had traveled these mountains for years. By the time they reached the tree line again, the sun was dipping toward the western peaks. Beatrice found a good spot to camp, a small clearing with a rock overhang that would provide shelter and windbreak. She set up camp efficiently while Aaron tended the horses under her direction, his vision just good enough in the dim evening light that he could work without stumbling. Over dinner, they talked about practical matters. Aaron would need to meet with his supervisor at Fort Stanton and file his report. Beatrice would need to visit the trading post to sell her furs and resupply. And then they would need to figure out where they were going to live and how Aaron would transition to local surveying work. "It will not be easy," Beatrice said honestly. "People in Fort Stanton know me as the strange woman who lives alone in the mountains. When I suddenly appear with you, there will be talk." "Let them talk," Aaron said firmly. "We have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. We met by chance, I was injured, you saved me, and we fell in love. It is a better romance than most couples can claim." Beatrice laughed. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather romantic." "Because it is romantic. What could be more romantic than literally leading my horse through a mountain pass because I was blind? You are my guide in every sense of the word, Beatrice. You have led me not just through the mountains, but out of the lonely existence I was trapped in." His words moved her deeply. "And you have given me a reason to rejoin the world. I was hiding in these mountains, Aaron, hiding from pain and loss and risk. You have reminded me that life is more than just survival. It is about connection and love and building something with another person." They kissed, a long, deep kiss that promised everything and demanded nothing. When they finally separated, both were smiling. "So what do we do first when we reach Fort Stanton?" Aaron asked. "First, you see a doctor about your eyes. Then we find somewhere to stay while we figure everything else out. And then we start building our life together." The next morning brought their arrival in Fort Stanton. The settlement was larger than Beatrice had remembered, having grown considerably in the 2 months since her last visit. New buildings had gone up, and the main street bustled with activity even in the cold February morning. Beatrice led Aaron's horse down the main street, acutely aware of the stares they attracted. She sat tall in her saddle, refusing to show any discomfort with the attention. Aaron, his eyes still shaded but obviously much improved, rode beside her with quiet dignity. Their first stop was the doctor's office. Dr. Harrison was a capable physician who had served with the Army before settling in Fort Stanton. He examined Aaron's eyes carefully, nodding with approval at Beatrice's treatment. "You did excellent work, Miss Palmer," he said. "The poultices likely saved his sight. Snow blindness can cause permanent damage if not treated properly." "How are my eyes now?" Aaron asked. "Healing well." "Another week and you should be back to normal, though you will need to protect them from bright light for a while longer. No more traveling in high snow country without proper eye protection." Aaron promised to be more careful, and they left the doctor's office in good spirits. Their next stop was the hotel, where Aaron secured 2 rooms. Beatrice raised an eyebrow at that, and he grinned. "For propriety's sake," he explained, "though I hope we will not need to maintain separate rooms for long." She blushed, but did not argue. There would be time enough for more permanent arrangements once they had settled in. Aaron spent the afternoon meeting with his railroad supervisor, a stern man named Mr. Blackwell, who accepted Aaron's maps and notes with grudging approval. When Aaron explained that he would not be continuing with the railroad survey, choosing instead to establish himself as an independent surveyor in the Fort Stanton area, Blackwell was less pleased. "You are making a mistake, Ashford," he said bluntly. "The railroad is the future. Independent surveying work is small potatoes compared to what we can offer you." "Perhaps," Aaron agreed, "but I have found something more important than career advancement. I am building a life, Mr. Blackwell, not just a resume." Blackwell snorted but did not argue further. He paid Aaron what he was owed and wished him luck in a tone that suggested he thought Aaron would need it. Meanwhile, Beatrice visited the trading post run by Mrs. Chen, a middle-aged widow who had always treated Beatrice with kindness. Mrs. Chen examined the furs Beatrice had brought, nodding with approval at their quality. "These are good," she said. "I will give you a fair price." She counted out payment, then fixed Beatrice with a shrewd look. "I hear you came into town with a man, the handsome surveyor with the injured eyes." News traveled fast in Fort Stanton, apparently. Beatrice did not bother denying it. "His name is Aaron Ashford. He got snow blindness in the high passes, and I helped him." "Helped him," Mrs. Chen repeated with a knowing smile. "And now he is staying at the hotel, and you are staying there too." "People are talking, Beatrice." "I imagine they are. Let them talk." Mrs. Chen laughed. "Good for you. You deserve happiness, and that young man looks at you like you hung the moon. When is the wedding?" "We have not discussed it yet," Beatrice admitted. "Everything has happened so fast." "Love does not run on a schedule," Mrs. Chen said wisely. "When you know, you know. And you know, I can see it in your eyes." Beatrice could not argue with that. She did know. She loved Aaron Ashford with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her. That evening, Beatrice and Aaron had dinner together in the hotel dining room, enduring the curious stares of other diners with as much grace as they could muster. Afterward, they walked through town in the twilight, Aaron's arm around Beatrice's waist, talking about their plans. "I visited the land office today," Aaron said. "There is a property available about 3 miles outside of town, 20 acres with a small cabin and a stream running through it. Good grazing for horses, close enough to town to be convenient but far enough for privacy." "You are thinking of buying land?" Beatrice asked, her heart speeding up. "I am thinking of building a home, for us, if you will have me." She stopped walking and turned to face him. In the fading light, his face was serious, his eyes still slightly red but healing, fixed on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Aaron Ashford, are you asking me to marry you?" "I suppose I am," he said with a slow smile, "though I am making a hash of it. I do not have a ring, and this is hardly the most romantic setting, but yes, Beatrice Palmer, I am asking you to marry me. Will you?" Joy flooded through her, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her there in the middle of the street, and if people stared, neither of them cared. They had found each other against all odds, 2 lonely people colliding in the wilderness, and discovering that together they were no longer alone. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Aaron purchased the property he had found, and they spent their days working together to make the cabin livable. It was small but well built, with a good fireplace and solid roof. Beatrice contributed her wilderness skills, showing Aaron how to improve the property with simple additions like a smokehouse for preserving meat and a root cellar for storing vegetables. Aaron, meanwhile, began establishing his surveying business. Word spread quickly that there was a skilled surveyor available for hire, and soon he had more work than he could easily handle. Ranchers wanted their property lines established, mining claims needed to be surveyed and registered, and the military at Fort Stanton needed updated maps of the surrounding territory. It was not the grand work of surveying railroad routes across the continent, but Aaron threw himself into it with enthusiasm. He liked being his own boss, liked choosing his projects and setting his own schedule. And most of all, he liked coming home each evening to Beatrice, to the life they were building together. They were married on a bright morning in late March by the Justice of the Peace in Fort Stanton. Mrs. Chen stood as witness, and Dr. Harrison attended as well, declaring himself pleased to see his patient not only recovered but thriving. It was a small ceremony, but neither Aaron nor Beatrice wanted anything more elaborate. What mattered was the vows they made to each other, the promises to love and cherish through all the challenges life might bring. After the wedding, they returned to their small property and began building their life in earnest. Beatrice continued to hunt and trap, but now she did so closer to home, taking pride in providing meat and furs that contributed to their household. Aaron's surveying work brought in steady income, and together they were prospering in a way neither had thought possible just a few months earlier. Spring turned to summer, and their garden began to flourish. Beatrice had a talent for growing things, and soon they had vegetables to eat and preserve for the coming winter. Aaron built a larger barn for their horses and added a chicken coop, and before long they had fresh eggs each morning. But it was not just the material improvements that made their life rich. It was the partnership they had formed, the deep friendship that underlay their romantic love. They worked side by side during the day and talked for hours each evening, never running out of things to say to each other. Aaron taught Beatrice to read maps and understand basic surveying principles, and she taught him wilderness skills that made his work safer and more efficient. In July, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She told Aaron on a warm evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for, a mixture of joy and wonder and a fierce protectiveness that made her love him even more. "We are going to be parents," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "You are going to be a mother and I am going to be a father." "Are you ready for this?" Beatrice asked, suddenly nervous. "I have no idea," Aaron admitted honestly. "But I will learn, just as I have learned everything else worth knowing since meeting you. We will figure it out together." And they did. As Beatrice's pregnancy progressed, Aaron took on more of the heavy work around the property, insisting that she rest and take care of herself. But Beatrice was strong and healthy, and she continued to do most of her regular chores well into her 7th month, only slowing down when her growing belly made certain tasks impossible. Dr. Harrison checked on her regularly, pronouncing her in excellent health and predicting an easy delivery. Mrs. Chen visited often, bringing gifts for the baby and sharing advice from her own experience as a mother. Despite Beatrice's fears about being isolated and friendless, she found that the community of Fort Stanton was embracing her and Aaron, accepting them as valued members of the settlement. Their son was born on a cold February morning, almost exactly 1 year after Aaron had stumbled into Beatrice's mountain camp. The labor was long and difficult, but Beatrice was strong, and when she finally held her newborn son in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten in the rush of overwhelming love. "What should we name him?" Aaron asked, sitting beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, both of them staring in wonder at the tiny human they had created. "I was thinking about Andrew," Beatrice said. "Andrew Ashford. It means strong and manly, and it starts with A like his father." "Andrew," Aaron repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Andrew Ashford, welcome to the world." The baby, as if in response, opened his eyes and seemed to look directly at Aaron. They were gray-blue, like his father's, and full of innocent wonder. Aaron laughed, a sound of pure joy, and kissed first his son's forehead and then Beatrice's lips. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for our son, for our life, for everything." "Thank you for finding me," Beatrice replied, "or for letting your horse bring you to me. Thank you for teaching me that love is worth the risk." They sat together, the three of them, while outside the February snow began to fall, blanketing their small property in white. But inside, the cabin was warm, filled with the fire from the hearth and the even greater warmth of a family newly formed and full of promise. As the months passed, little Andrew grew strong and healthy, a happy baby who rarely cried and seemed fascinated by everything around him. Aaron proved to be a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, telling him stories and singing him songs. Beatrice watched them together and felt her heart swell with contentment. The surveying business continued to thrive. Aaron's reputation for accuracy and reliability spread, and soon he was being recommended for projects across the territory. He turned down work that would take him away from home for more than a few days, prioritizing his family over profit. They were not wealthy, but they had enough, and that was more than sufficient. When Andrew was 6 months old, Beatrice returned to hunting, taking short trips into the mountains while Aaron cared for their son. She had missed the wilderness, missed the solitude and challenge of tracking game through the forest. But now she always returned home eagerly, no longer content with solitude when she had such richness waiting for her. On one such hunting trip, Beatrice found herself in the mountains where she and Aaron had first met. She stood in the clearing where her camp had been, remembering that dawn morning when a blind man on a horse had stumbled into her life and changed everything. It seemed impossible that only 18 months had passed since that moment. In that time, she had gone from solitary survival to a life overflowing with love and purpose. She said a silent prayer of thanks to whatever forces had brought Aaron to her camp that morning, then turned and headed home to her family. 2 years after Andrew's birth, Beatrice gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Bethany. She had her mother's dark hair and determined chin, and from the moment she arrived, she made it clear she would not be overlooked. Where Andrew was content and placid, Bethany was energetic and demanding, filling the cabin with her cries and later her laughter. Aaron adored both his children equally, but Beatrice sometimes caught him watching Bethany with a special softness in his eyes. "She reminds me of you," he explained when she asked about it. "That fierce independence, that refusal to be limited by anyone's expectations. She is going to be remarkable, just like her mother." As the children grew, Aaron began teaching them the skills they would need to thrive in the territory. Andrew showed an aptitude for mathematics and map-making, often following his father on surveying trips and asking endless questions about how to measure and record the land. Bethany was more interested in her mother's skills, learning to track and shoot and identify plants with a focus that belied her young age. "We have raised competent children," Aaron observed one evening as they watched Andrew carefully plotting coordinates while Bethany practiced her archery in the yard. "They will need to be competent," Beatrice replied. "This is still a hard land, for all that we have made a comfortable life in it. They need to know how to survive, but also how to thrive," Aaron added, How to find love and build lives worth living. That is the real lesson we can teach them. When Andrew turned 7 and Bethany 5, Aaron decided it was time to expand the cabin. Their growing family needed more space, and Aaron's business had prospered enough that they could afford the expansion. He designed the addition himself, carefully calculating the load-bearing walls and proper proportions, and then he and Beatrice built it together with help from friends in Fort Stanton. The work was hard but satisfying, and by the time winter came, they had added 2 bedrooms and a larger main room. The children were delighted with their own spaces, and Aaron and Beatrice appreciated the privacy of their own bedroom, away from the main living area. It was in this expanded cabin that they welcomed their 3rd child, another son they named Adam. He was born in the spring, when the mountains were alive with new growth, and the world seemed full of possibility. Adam was a happy, easy baby who fit seamlessly into their family, adored by his older siblings and doted on by his parents. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew and learned. Aaron's business continued to prosper, and Beatrice found deep satisfaction in her roles as mother, wife, and provider. She still hunted regularly, her skills as sharp as ever, and she took pride in teaching her children the wilderness skills her father had taught her. Fort Stanton continued to grow, becoming more of a proper town than just a military outpost. More families arrived, and with them came schools and churches, and a greater sense of community. The Ashford family was well respected in town, known for their competence, integrity, and the obvious love they had for each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Aaron surprised Beatrice with a trip back to the mountains where they had met. They left the children with Mrs. Chen, who had become like a grandmother to them, and rode into the high country together. Aaron's eyes had long since healed completely, though he was always careful now to protect them from bright snow glare. They made camp in the same clearing where Beatrice had been that February morning 10 years earlier. As they sat by the fire that night, Aaron took Beatrice's hand. "I have been thinking about that morning you found me," he said. "About how lost I was, both literally and figuratively. I was wandering through life with no real purpose beyond my work, convincing myself I was content with solitude. I was doing the same thing," Beatrice admitted, "hiding in these mountains, telling myself I did not need anyone. We were both running from life," Aaron continued. "And then my eyes were damaged, and I was forced to stop running, forced to accept help, to be vulnerable, to trust someone completely. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Leading your horse through that mountain pass, being responsible for your safety, it changed me too," Beatrice said. "It reminded me that I was capable of caring for someone, that I was strong enough to take on that responsibility. You gave me back a part of myself I had thought lost forever." Aaron pulled her close, and they sat watching the fire in comfortable silence. 10 years of marriage had only deepened their love, transforming the passionate spark of their first meeting into a steady, enduring flame that warmed every aspect of their lives. "Thank you for choosing me," Aaron said softly. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago in Fort Stanton. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for finding me," Beatrice replied, "for stumbling into my camp that morning and giving me a reason to come down from this mountain." "I love you, Aaron Ashford." "I love you too, Beatrice Ashford, for the rest of my life and beyond." They made love that night under the stars in the same clearing where their story had begun, and it felt like coming home. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Andrew grew into a serious young man who followed his father into surveying, eventually joining the business and expanding it to include engineering work. Bethany became a skilled guide and tracker, leading hunting expeditions into the mountains and earning a reputation for her wilderness expertise. Adam showed artistic talent, spending hours sketching the landscapes and people around him, capturing the beauty of the territory in charcoal and paint. Aaron's hair went gray at the temples, and Beatrice developed lines around her eyes from years of squinting at the bright mountain sun. But they aged together, their love growing deeper and more comfortable with each passing year. They still made each other laugh, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still reached for each other in the night. When Aaron was 55 and Beatrice 51, they became grandparents for the first time. Andrew and his wife Sarah had a daughter they named Rose, and holding his granddaughter in his arms, Aaron was transported back to that February morning when he had first held his own son. "Time is a strange thing," he told Beatrice as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset while Rose slept in her grandmother's arms. "It feels like just yesterday we were the ones holding our newborn baby, and now we are grandparents." "We have lived a good life," Beatrice said contentedly. "We have built something lasting. Our children are happy and capable, and now we have grandchildren to spoil and enjoy." "Do you ever regret it?" Aaron asked. "Leaving your solitary life in the mountains, taking a chance on a blind stranger?" Beatrice looked at him, at the man who had become her whole world. His eyes, fully healed decades ago, crinkled with smile lines. His hair was more gray than brown now, but he was still the same man who had stumbled into her camp all those years ago, still the man who had taught her that love was worth every risk. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "That morning when I heard your horse approaching through the trees, my life changed forever. And every change has been for the better. You are the best decision I ever made, Aaron Ashford." He kissed her, a kiss full of decades of love and devotion, and in that moment Beatrice knew that their story was not just good, it was extraordinary. Two lonely people finding each other in the wilderness, building a life from love and trust and shared effort. It was a story worth telling, worth celebrating, worth living. More grandchildren came as the years passed. Bethany married a fellow guide named Thomas, and they had twin boys who were as wild and free as their mother. Adam married a schoolteacher named Clara, and they had 3 daughters who inherited their father's artistic talent. The Ashford family grew and flourished, their love spreading through the generations. Aaron and Beatrice's cabin became the gathering place for the family, especially during holidays and special occasions. The house was always full of laughter and love, children running through the yard, adults talking and cooking and sharing stories. Aaron would sit by the fire with his grandchildren clustered around him, telling them the story of how he met their grandmother. "I was blind as a bat," he would say, making the children giggle. "Could not see a thing, just white fire and pain. But your grandmother took me in, cared for me, led my horse through the mountain pass to safety. She saved my life and then she changed it forever. Tell us about the pass, Grandma." The children would beg, and Beatrice would describe leading Aaron's horse through the narrow, icy trail. The trust required from both of them, the beginning of a love that would last a lifetime. These stories became family legend, passed down to each new generation as an example of what love could look like when two people chose each other despite the odds. As Aaron and Beatrice entered their 60s, they began to slow down, though neither was ready to stop living fully. Aaron turned over most of the surveying business to Andrew, but still occasionally took on projects that interested him. Beatrice still hunted, though her trips were shorter and closer to home now. They spent more time simply being together, enjoying the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love they had nurtured for so many years. On a warm summer evening, when Aaron was 68 and Beatrice 64, they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Their children were all settled in their own homes, their grandchildren growing up strong and capable. The territory had changed dramatically since that February morning when Aaron had stumbled into Beatrice's camp, but their love remained constant. "Do you remember what you said to me the first time I opened my eyes after the snow blindness?" Aaron asked, taking Beatrice's hand. "I said many things," Beatrice replied with a smile. "Which particular thing do you mean?" "You told me to be patient, that good things take time." "You were talking about my eyes healing, but you might as well have been talking about us, about building a life together." "Good things do take time," Beatrice agreed. "We have spent 40 years building this life, and every year has been a gift." 40 years of leading me through various mountain passes," Aaron said with a laugh. "Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. You have always been my guide, Beatrice, my compass, my true north." "And you have been my home," Beatrice said softly. "Before you, I was adrift, even if I did not realize it. You gave me a place to belong, a reason to come down from my mountain and engage with the world. You gave me a family, a purpose, a love deeper than I ever imagined possible." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars emerged. Behind them, through the cabin windows, they could hear the sounds of their grandchildren playing, visiting for the weekend. The house was full of life and laughter, exactly as they had always wanted. "I would do it all again," Aaron said suddenly. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you again and again in this life and any other." "As would I," Beatrice said, squeezing his hand. "You are my greatest adventure, Aaron Ashford. Greater than any mountain I could climb, any game I could track. Loving you has been the most challenging and rewarding thing I have ever done." They kissed, a kiss full of 40 years of shared history, and when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Their story had begun with snow blindness and a mountain pass, with vulnerability and trust. It had grown into something neither of them could have predicted, something beautiful and lasting and real. Inside the cabin, their grandchildren called for them, wanting to hear another story before bed. Aaron and Beatrice stood, moving a bit slower than they once had, but still strong, still capable, still deeply in love. They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready to tell their story one more time. Because it was a story worth telling. A story of two lonely people finding each other in the wilderness and building a love that would last not just their lifetimes, but echo through the generations to come. It was a story of trust and courage, of choosing love even when it seemed risky, of building a life together through hard work and dedication and unwavering commitment. It was their story, and it was extraordinary. As the years continued to pass, Aaron and Beatrice remained the heart of their large, loving family. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, births and marriages, watching with pride as their children and grandchildren thrived. They grew old together with grace and dignity, supporting each other through the inevitable challenges that came with age. Aaron's mind remained sharp even as his body weakened, and he spent his later years writing detailed memoirs of his surveying work and his life with Beatrice. Beatrice, for her part, finally took Aaron's advice from so many years ago and began recording her knowledge of wilderness survival and herbalism, creating detailed guides that would be passed down through the family. When they were in their mid-70s, they made one final trip to the mountains where they had met. Their children protested, worried about the difficulty of the journey, but Aaron and Beatrice insisted. They needed to return to where it all began, to close the circle of their lives together. They rode slowly, taking several days to cover ground that would have taken them hours in their youth. But they were in no hurry. They savored every moment, every view, every memory the landscape evoked. When they finally reached the clearing where Beatrice's camp had been all those years ago, they dismounted and simply stood, holding hands, remembering. "I can almost see you as you were that morning," Aaron said softly. "Young and strong and a little bit frightening, emerging from the trees to help a blind stranger." "And I can see you," Beatrice replied. "Lost and vulnerable but determined to survive, trusting me to guide you to safety." They made camp one last time in that clearing, and as they sat by the fire that night, they talked about everything they had experienced together. The struggles and triumphs, the sorrows and joys, the ordinary moments that had woven together to create an extraordinary life. "I have no regrets," Aaron said as the fire burned low. "Not a single one. This life with you has been everything I could have hoped for and more." "Nor do I," Beatrice agreed. "We have been blessed beyond measure. We found each other when we both needed finding. We built a life when we both needed building. We loved each other when we both needed loving. It has been enough. It has been more than enough." They slept that night wrapped in each other's arms under the stars in the place where their love had begun. And when morning came, they broke camp and rode slowly back down the mountain, back to their family, back to the life they had built together. Aaron passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 years later, at the age of 78. Beatrice held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering her love to him one final time. The grief was overwhelming, but it was tempered by gratitude for the 55 years they had shared, for the family they had raised, for the love that had sustained them both. Beatrice lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who cared for her with the same devotion she had shown Aaron all those years ago. She remained mentally sharp until the end, telling stories and sharing wisdom, ensuring that the lessons she and Aaron had learned would be passed down through the generations. On a clear February morning, almost exactly 60 years after she had first encountered a blind stranger on a horse, Beatrice Palmer Ashford took her last breath. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her bed, holding her hands, singing her mother's old songs, sending her off with love. She was buried next to Aaron on their property, under the cottonwood trees they had planted together in the first year of their marriage. The headstones were simple, bearing just their names and dates, but the love they represented was anything but simple. It was a love that had started with snow blindness and a mountain pass, with one person leading another to safety. It had grown into something that transformed not just 2 lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of how Aaron's eyes were damaged from snow blindness, and Beatrice led his horse through the mountain pass, and how that moment of crisis became the foundation for a love that lasted a lifetime. It was a reminder that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places, that vulnerability can lead to strength, that trust can build unbreakable bonds. The property they had built together remained in the family, passed down through the generations. The cabin they had expanded over the years became a gathering place, a reminder of the love that had started it all. And every February, on the anniversary of that morning when Aaron stumbled into Beatrice's camp, the family would gather to remember and celebrate the couple whose love had created them all. Because Aaron and Beatrice Ashford had not just built a life together. They had built a legacy, a testament to the power of love and trust, and choosing each other against all odds. Their story proved that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple act of kindness. That sometimes being willing to lead someone through a difficult passage, opens the door to a lifetime of shared journeys. Their love had been tested by time and hardship, by the challenges of building a life on the frontier, by loss and struggle, and all the inevitable difficulties of human existence. But it had endured, growing stronger with each passing year, each shared challenge, each moment of connection. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not the obstacles they had faced, but the love that had carried them through. Not the difficulties of their beginning, but the beauty of their ending. Not the moments of doubt or fear, but the decades of certainty and trust. Aaron and Beatrice Ashford had found each other in the wilderness, two lost souls seeking shelter from different storms. They had built a life together from nothing but love and determination, and an unwavering commitment to each other. And they had created something that would outlast them both, a love story that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. It was a story that began with damaged eyes and a mountain pass, with one person trusting another to lead them to safety. But it became so much more than that. It became a testament to the transformative power of love, to the possibility of new beginnings even in the darkest moments, to the truth that sometimes the best thing you can do is extend your hand to a stranger and say, "I will help you. Trust me." Because that is what Beatrice had done for Aaron on that February morning 60 years ago. She had seen a man in need and had chosen to help, not knowing that in saving him, she would also save herself. She had led his horse through the mountain pass, guiding them both to safety, to Fort Stanton, to a future neither of them could have imagined. And in doing so, she had led them both home,